Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Wednesday, May 1st, day 208. U.S. aid officials concluded that Israel is in violation of a White House directive requiring recipients of American weapons to comply with international humanitarian law and permit the unimpeded delivery of U.S.-funded humanitarian support, according to a confidential U.S. paper reviewed by Devex, which is a media platform for the global development community. The paper was cleared by 10 officials from U.S. aid, underscoring the widespread backing of its findings. Among other things, the paper from U.S. aid voiced, quote, serious concerns that the killing of then nearly 32,000 people, of which the government of Israel itself assesses roughly 2/3 are civilians, may well amount to the violation of international humanitarian law. But it added that a final determination would be subject to a detailed analysis by U.S. government lawyers. The Israeli Foreign Minister spokesperson Oren Marmortstein told the author of this article by text that Israel operates and continues to operate according to international law. He added that Israel will continue to fight Hamas until the destruction of its military and governmental infrastructure and until the release of the 133 hostages still held by Hamas. The fight comes despite the deteriorating humanitarian plight in Gaza. The Biden administration anticipates international experts will declare an ongoing famine in Gaza by early next month, which is now. By early May, according to a separate internal memo by the Secretary of State Anthony Blinken and from U.S. experts on food security in the State Department and U.S. aid. The subject line of the memo, which was also seen by the author, reads, famine inevitable. Changes could reduce but not stop widespread civilian deaths. This bleak assessment claims that the severity of the food crisis in Gaza, which has left a population of more than 2 million people in need of food, is unparalleled in recent times, and that even the arrival of food to hungry Palestinians would be insufficient to stave off deaths from starvation. So that's a significant update. This memo is supposed to be confidential, and this development news source got access to it. Good for U.S. aid for calling the alarm. We've been calling on them to do so. Might the Biden administration listen? Campus updates at Columbia. We talked about yesterday the fact that there were students that blockaded themselves into a building. Late last night, police forces actually entered into that building, and now the encampment on Columbus's campus has been removed. Instead of tents and supplies, you can see a green lawn again. There are stains where some of the tents were pitched. It's been a few hours since the police have arrested and removed dozens of protesters. There are still officers at Pulitzer Hall, while others are still working to remove banners from the facade of Hamilton Hall, which was the hall that was occupied by protesters. Prior to the arrest of those who had occupied the building, there's a picture that can be seen of a student that went to the top of the building and waved a Palestinian flag. Other campus protests continue. Police continue to arrest protesters all around the country at various campuses. One of the situations that's a bit unique is at Brown University, where the university acquiesced and said that they would take a vote on divestment later on this fall. In terms of U.S.-Israel relationships, Secretary Blinken met with Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Isaac Herzog. They discussed efforts related to the hostage deal and the delivery of aid to Gaza. According to a State Department spokesperson, in light of the recent truce proposal presented by Egypt, Blinken noted that the only reason a ceasefire agreement would not be achieved is because of Hamas, and that humanitarian aid deliveries to Gaza have improved, but reiterated that they still needed to be accelerated. This just sounds like things that we've been hearing for months. It sounds like no real change to me. In a post on X, U.S. President Joe Biden wrote that Hamas is now the only obstacle to an immediate ceasefire and relief for civilians in Gaza. A senior Hamas official said that Blinken is unfairly blaming Hamas for delays in reaching a truce. He said it's not strange for Blinken, who is known as the foreign minister of Israel, not America, to make such a statement. Blinken cautioned Israeli leaders, including Netanyahu and the Defense Minister Gallant and War Cabinet Minister Gantz, that an Israeli operation in Rafah at this time would diminish the chances of reaching a hostage release deal. It would also impact U.S. efforts to promote normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia. The wording of the Egyptian proposal for a ceasefire as it was delivered to Hamas does not include an Israeli commitment to not return to Gaza, according to a Lebanese newspaper. You may recall that's one of the conditions that Hamas has always demanded. They've said, we're not going to release all of the hostages and then have Israel continue dropping bombs on Gaza. Like, that's been one of their non-starters, that they would release all of the hostages in exchange for a comprehensive ceasefire. So who's to say if this deal is going to move forward? Dozens of demonstrators gathered outside of a Tel Aviv hotel, the hotel that Blinken is staying in, and they chanted, "In Blinken we trust," to bring them home to us. Blinken later addressed the crowd and said, bringing your loved ones home is at the heart of everything we're trying to do. The far-right National Missions Minister Strzok said during an interview with the Israeli Army radio that the deal that is being discussed with Hamas is reckless, horrible, and terrible, and that there is no right of existence for a government that tells soldiers who went to fight and now is throwing it all in the trash just to save 22 or 33 people. He was referring to the hostages who would be released in the current deal. In Gaza, the UN aid chief, Martin Griffiths, warned that an Israeli ground operation is on the immediate horizon and that Israeli improvements to aid cannot be used to prepare for or justify a full-blown military assault on the southernmost part of the Strip. From the very first time the war began, Israel opened the Erez crossing to allow humanitarian aid from the north of the Strip. That was promised weeks and weeks ago, and it sounds like is just beginning to be applied. Jordan said that the Israeli settlers attacked 2 aid convoys on the way to Gaza, according to Jordanian state media. And Hamas has informed that direct damages as a result of the war in Gaza are estimated to be at about $33 billion, and that roughly 90% of the residents of Gaza are living below the poverty line. The death toll, according to the health ministry, is at 34,568 Palestinians, and those wounded at 77,765. And it's estimated that there are more than 10,000 people lost under the rubble or otherwise killed. An unknown assailant hurled a bottle containing a flammable substance at a synagogue in Warsaw earlier today, according to police in Poland. In terms of other news, the U.S. Pier off of Gaza is about to, quote, it's about show and not efficacy, according to UN expert Mark Goldberg. So the pier being built off of Gaza, I was reading more about it, it's actually being built 2 miles off the shore, and then smaller boats will have to shuttle in the aid. The amount of aid it will bring in is about the equivalent of 150 trucks. It will cost millions of dollars, according to this UN expert. There's an article about that I would encourage you to read. You can look up Mark Goldberg about the U.S. Pier and his analysis of it, and he says it's all about show. It's kind of another example of dropping aid from the sky. The amount of the cost when you have trucks lined up that are ready to go and are not being let into Gaza, that the cost and money and time on this pier is totally inefficient. I wanted to close by acknowledging that this is Jewish American Heritage Month. We should celebrate Jewish American history. There is a great history. President Biden issued a statement today about this, and he announced the first ever United States national strategy to counter anti-Semitism. And he clarified the civil rights protections for Jews under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. In his statement to the Jewish community, he said the Department of Education has also launched investigations into anti-Semitism on college campuses. One of the things that we do need to be very concerned about is this definition of anti-Semitism, which is seeking to conflate anti-Semitism and legitimate criticism of the state of Israel. Part of what he is talking about, he's been using a lot of very strong language in direct response to student protesters who've used language that's very common in Palestinian rhetoric, language and words like intifada, which means shaking off. He said that the Department of Justice is investigating and prosecuting hate crimes. And I just want to say, I fully support efforts to keep Jewish people safe. We have to, we must. It's wrong for Jewish people to not feel safe, just as it's wrong for any person to not feel safe. And I call on President Biden to exercise the same fervor and the same protections and the same passions that he has towards protecting Jewish people, to protect all Americans, to protect Arab Americans, to protect Muslim Americans, to protect people of any faith tradition. I wish that he had the same passion towards the 3 Palestinian American college students who were shot, literally shot, when they were wearing keffiyehs in Vermont last year, or the 2 Palestinian American teenagers who were killed by the Israeli Defense Forces in the West Bank earlier this year, or Shireen Abu Akleh, the Palestinian American journalist who was literally shot in the head and killed. Biden closed this letter and said, "Together we send the message in America: evil will not win and hate will not prevail. The venom and violence of anti-Semitism will not be the story of our time." And he's right, evil will not win, and anti-Semitism is evil, and anti-Muslim attitudes and behavior is evil. Anti-Muslim hatred is evil. And President Biden continuing to send bombs to Israel that are being used to kill innocent children in Gaza is evil. So President Biden is right that hate will not prevail. He continued and he said, "We remember that the power lies within each of us to rise together against hate, to see each other as fellow human beings, and to ensure that the Jewish community is afforded safety, security, and dignity that they deserve as they continue to shine their light in America and around the world. And I affirm all of that to be true and want to extend that same belief to Muslim Americans and to all Americans, that may we extend that the entire community of America be safe and secure, that we honor each other's dignity. And as it is Jewish American History Month, may we honor Jewish Americans who've never given the promise of our nation. And he talked about celebrating contributions and culture and value of Jewish Americans. And I wanted to close with a quote from Abraham Joshua Heschel, who wrote in 1972 this, and I think that this is a great word for us to close on. He said, "Morally speaking, there is no limit to concern that one must feel for the suffering of human beings. Indifference to evil is worse than evil itself. And in a free society, some are guilty, but all are responsible." I hope that President Biden takes that to heart and that we all do as well, as we continue in our efforts in calling for a comprehensive ceasefire and in working towards peace.